up to 75% of business intelligence initiatives fail. I mean, 75%. And the crazy part, it is almost never a technology problem.
Yeah, that number always gets me.
Right. Well, welcome to Data Design with Mockup. I am so thrilled you're joining us today on this April 1st, 2026 for episode 12.
It's a big one today.
It really is. Whether you are prepping for a major meeting or, just catching up on the latest in data strategy, or even if you're just insanely curious about how businesses actually make decisions, you are in the exact right place.
Absolutely.
Today, we are taking a deep dive into a topic that hits, well, very close to home. We're talking about the fatal flaw of static KPI dashboard templates. And we'll get into the game-changing alternative that is completely shifting how teams operate, which is dashboard wireframing.
You know, that 75% failure rate is just a staggering number. But, I mean, anyone who has spent time in the trenches of data analytics knows exactly how real it is.
Oh, 100%.
You think you're taking a shortcut to visualize your data, and then you just end up completely lost in the woods, burning like weeks of time on something nobody ends up using.
Exactly. So if you have ever felt completely overwhelmed staring at a dashboard that was, supposed to make your life easier.
Or if you're the one building it and you're frustrated by endless revisions.
Yes, those soul-crushing revisions from stakeholders who just keep changing their minds. If that's you, this deep dive is specifically for you. We are going to explain exactly why that happens.
And more importantly, how to actually fix it.
Right. Our mission today is to uncover the secret to creating dashboards that actually drive business decisions.
Yeah.
Not just things that look pretty on a monitor. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because getting back to that statistic from our sources.
The 75%.
Right. The idea that failure is rarely a technology problem.
Yeah.
That completely flips the script on how we usually think about data, doesn't it?
It really does. Because, we constantly want to blame the software, right? Or the cloud provider, or the complex data pipelines.
Sure, it's the easy target.
Exactly. But when a business intelligence project fails, like when a dashboard is launched and then quietly abandoned a month later, the root cause almost always boils down to poor stakeholder alignment.
Just a total disconnect.
Yeah. A team is under pressure. They need to show progress quickly, so they go online, download a pre-built static KPI dashboard template, drop their data into it, and they assume the heavy lifting is done.
And spoiler alert, it is definitely not done.
Not at all. The problem is that those templates prioritize aesthetic layout over actual decision-making. They give you this, illusion of a finished product without forcing you to do the foundational alignment work.
Right. And to really understand why wireframing becomes the hero of this story later on, we have to look closely at the mechanics of why that default approach, the downloaded template, fails so spectacularly.
It's a cascading effect, really.
It is. Our sources detail 5 core root causes of template failure. But, like you said, they don't happen in a vacuum. They actually trigger each other in this massive domino effect.
Where does it usually start?
Well, it usually starts with a complete lack of decision-focused goals. A template just gives you a grid of empty boxes to fill with charts. It never stops to ask you what specific business decisions those charts are actually supposed to inform.
Which is incredibly dangerous. If you build a dashboard without defining the exact business actions it is supposed to support, you just end up trying to fill space.
It's plugging holes.
Right. And human nature dictates that when we don't know exactly what to measure, we try to measure absolutely everything just in case.
Oh, the just-in-case metric.
Exactly. Which immediately triggers the second failure point, which is too many metrics in one dashboard. Templates actually encourage this by providing these dense layouts with 12 or 15 different chart modules crammed onto one single screen.
I call it the horror vacui of data design. Just this overwhelming fear of empty white space.
That's a great way to put it.
But when you present business leaders with 15 competing metrics simultaneously, you are completely ignoring how human cognitive load works.
Yeah, they just shut down.
They really do.
Yeah.
They cannot identify the most important insights because the critical data is drowned out by the noise of, secondary and tertiary metrics. They look at it, get overwhelmed, and just close the tab.
And let's look at what happens when you have that many undefined metrics floating around. You run headfirst into the third problem, which is inconsistent KPI definitions across different teams.
Oh, this is the worst one.
It's a nightmare. When you are just slapping numbers into a generic template grid, you are skipping the crucial and sometimes really uncomfortable conversations about what these numbers actually mean.
Right.
Let's say you have a metric labeled monthly conversions sitting in the top right corner of your template. Marketing might look at that and say, well, a conversion is a white paper download.
Sure.
But sales looks at the exact same box and defines a conversion as a signed, finalized contract.
I have literally been in boardrooms where that exact scenario played out. And it is entirely counterproductive. You've got two executives arguing over whose number is right instead of actually talking about the business strategy.
Because the groundwork wasn't laid.
Exactly. Which directly feeds into the fourth issue, a total lack of business context. I mean, a template just gives you a floating number. If a KPI is not explicitly linked to a broader business goal, decision makers cannot understand what action to take, even if the data itself is mathematically flawless.
Right, exactly. How are they supposed to act on a number that has no anchor?
They can't.
And the real tragedy of the static template approach is that all of these flaws, the lack of goals, the cognitive overload, the inconsistent definitions, the missing context, none of this gets discovered until the very end of the process.
Which brings us to number 5.
Right, late stakeholder feedback. Because the team was working in a silo to fill out a template, the stakeholders don't see anything until the dashboard is fully coded and allegedly finished.
Relying on a static template is, well, it's like buying a pre-furnished house without checking the structural engineering.
Okay, I like that comparison.
You walk in, the couches are there, the rugs look nice, the paint is fresh, it looks totally complete. But then you realize you need the kitchen sink on the other side of the room to actually cook efficiently.
And you can't just pick it up and move it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the house is already fully built, you can't just slide the sink over. You have to tear open the drywall, reroute the actual copper plumbing, change the foundational drainage systems, and rebuild the entire wall just to move one thing.
It's a massive undertaking.
It is. The visual layout forces you to do massive structural engineering just to make a basic adjustment. It looks perfect from the outside, but it is completely unlivable for your specific situation.
That analogy hits the nail on the head, especially when we start talking about the mechanism of how data actually flows. And the nightmare really accelerates when you try to force your actual chaotic business reality into that rigid, pre-furnished structure.
Oh.
This introduces what our sources call the static template fallacy, and it carries 3 massive hidden costs that teams rarely anticipate. The first cost is the data reality gap. A downloaded template assumes your data is pristine.
Which is hilarious because real business data is never, ever pristine. It is usually a tangled mess.
Oh, a total mess. Templates are designed in a perfect vacuum. The creator assumes you have beautifully structured data with perfect standard sales categories and unblemished sequential revenue numbers.
Must be nice.
Right. But for the listener who deals with this every day, you know that your actual database has missing fields, inconsistent naming conventions, and data pulling from 3 completely different legacy systems.
Yeah, the stuff from the 90s that no one wants to touch.
Exactly. For those less familiar with the back end, think of a data pipeline as the complex plumbing we just talked about. It has to pull raw, messy numbers from a company's sales software, clean them up, format them, and pipe them into the dashboard.
So when you try to force that messy reality into a fixed template layout, the gap becomes painfully obvious. Suddenly, what was supposed to be a quick start template turns into an agonizing, weeks-long process.
You're either breaking the template or breaking the data.
Right. You are either breaking the visual template to accommodate your messy data, or you're aggressively manipulating your data to fit the strict confines of the template.
And while the data engineering team is suffering through that structural nightmare, the business side is falling into the second hidden cost, which is the "I'll know it when I see it" trap.
Oh, the classic trap.
What's fascinating here is the underlying psychology behind how stakeholders communicate their requirements. It is a highly documented phenomenon in software and data development.
How so?
Well, you sit down with an executive, give them a blank piece of paper, and ask, what exact metrics do you want on this dashboard? And most of the time, they just draw a blank.
Yeah, they have no idea.
Human beings, especially really busy executives, struggle to articulate complex operational needs from a purely abstract blank slate. They need a concrete visual anchor to react to.
So they just punt the decision.
Exactly. So they inevitably tell the data team, Just build something based on the template, and I will know if it is right when I see it.
Okay, I hear what you're saying about the danger of skipping alignment, but let's be realistic for a second. If I sit down with a CEO, they really do have no idea what they want until I put a screen in front of them.
Very true.
If we know that human beings are visual creatures who need that concrete anchor to refine their thinking, aren't we just stuck? Like, how do we get them to react and give us that vital feedback without doing all the heavy coding first to give them a finished product?
That is the pivotal question, and it perfectly illustrates why the traditional approach is broken. Because the third hidden cost, which is rework after development, is the penalty you pay for building the whole dashboard just to get a reaction.
I see.
If stakeholders only see the dashboard after it is built, their visual feedback requires catastrophic rework. If an executive looks at the quote-unquote finished template and says, actually, I need this to show sales by specific regional zip codes instead of total national sales.
You aren't just tweaking a chart.
No, not at all. You have to rip out the plumbing. You have to rewrite the SQL queries, the highly specific coded instructions that tell the database how to fetch and group information.
Right.
You have to alter the underlying data models. You spend hundreds of hours doing back-end engineering just to accommodate a visual layout change.
Which completely destroys the timeline and the budget.
It creates a perpetual cycle of costly redesigns. The dashboard becomes incredibly fragile, the data team gets totally burned out, and the stakeholders lose faith in the entire process.
Well, this brings us to the ultimate solution outlined in our sources. The way you break out of this trap, the way you provide that necessary visual anchor without doing hundreds of hours of back-end plumbing, is through dashboard wireframing.
Yes, finally. Wireframing completely upends the traditional workflow. It is a planning-first approach.
Meaning you sketch before you build.
Exactly. Instead of starting with a rigid static template or jumping straight into heavy development tools like Power BI or Tableau where you have to write code, you create a rough, interactive visual layout first.
Okay.
You sketch out exactly where the KPIs will go, where the charts will live, and how the information is visually grouped. But, and this is key, you are doing all of this without connecting a single drop of actual data.
Here's where it gets really interesting because the source material does this brilliant side-by-side comparison of static KPI templates versus interactive dashboard wireframes. And, the differences are night and day.
They really are.
With a static template, you have a fixed layout that requires structural engineering to change. With a wireframe, you have a flexible layout. If the CEO wants the pie chart moved to the bottom, you just drag and drop it in 2 seconds.
Furthermore, with templates, you are confined to predefined metrics that might be entirely irrelevant to your specific business model. But with wireframes, you define custom KPIs collaboratively with your stakeholders during the planning phase. You are designing the metrics around the business, not forcing the business to fit the metrics.
And think about the feedback loop we were just discussing. Templates guarantee you only get feedback after the entire house is built and the plumbing is sealed in the walls.
And when it's too late.
Exactly. Wireframes mean you get robust, critical feedback while you are still looking at the paper blueprints. It makes it infinitely cheaper to erase a line and just draw a new one.
It also directly solves the data reality gap. Because templates assume pristine data, they basically shatter when they hit reality.
Right, they can't handle the mess.
But wireframing allows the data team to look at the proposed visual layout and immediately cross-reference it with the reality of their messy data architecture.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, a data engineer can look at a wireframe draft and say, we actually don't have the clean data pipeline to support this specific regional chart right now, so let's pivot and use a different metric for launch.
You design around reality.
Exactly, which dramatically lowers the risk of post-build rework because the technical requirements are locked in and sanity checked really early on.
Because you need a way to build out this visual blueprint quickly, without doing the heavy back-end coding just to show an executive mock-up. Tools specifically built for zero-code wireframing, like Mockup.ai, have emerged as absolute game changers for teams.
They really have.
They allow you to build these collaborative, interactive environments. You aren't wrestling with clunky Excel cells or trying to force a PowerPoint slide to look like a functional dashboard. You are in a purpose-built space designed to mock up data stories incredibly fast.
It acts as the perfect bridge. A wireframing tool gives stakeholders that concrete visual anchor they desperately need to refine their abstract thinking, but it doesn't cost the data team 100 hours of back-end SQL coding to produce it.
You save so much time.
You literally can sit in a meeting with the chief revenue officer, pull up a wireframe, and change a bar chart to a line graph in real time based on their feedback. The requirements gathering process becomes an interactive design session.
That real-time collaboration seems like a superpower compared to the old way of gathering requirements via, like, a massive spreadsheet.
Oh, nobody wants to read those spreadsheets.
Nobody.
Yeah.
So now that we have established how wireframing provides the blueprint, let's connect the dots on how this translates to real-world success and major time savings. Because designing the dashboard is really only half the battle.
True.
The other half is making sure people actually trust it and use it.
The most crucial strategic advantage of wireframing is securing executive sign-off before a single row of data is cleaned. And, for anyone who hasn't worked directly in data engineering, it is hard to overstate how critical this is.
The cleaning phase is brutal.
It is. Data cleaning, data transformation, and modeling. The actual process of organizing the digital warehouse so the software can find things quickly. That is the heavy lifting. That is where 80% of the time and budget goes in a business intelligence project.
Wrangling the messy inputs, fixing the broken pipelines, standardizing the currencies across global offices. I mean, it is a massive undertaking.
And if you start all of that heavy lifting before the stakeholders have explicitly agreed on the exact questions the dashboard needs to answer, you are gambling with your time.
A huge gamble.
You might spend 3 weeks building a pristine data pipeline for a specific sales metric, only to have the executive look at the finished dashboard and say, actually, I don't care about that metric anymore.
Which just makes you want to pull your hair out.
Exactly. But by using a wireframe to secure visual approval first, you ensure that every single hour your team spends cleaning data is applied to a metric that the business actually wants, needs, and has formally approved.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is about so much more than just a project management hack to build things faster. It is a profound adoption strategy.
It truly is. Consider the psychology of ownership, sometimes referred to as the IKEA effect.
Because you value what you build yourself.
Exactly. When executives and operational stakeholders are invited into the early wireframing process, they aren't just passive recipients of a finished product, they get to co-create the layout.
They're in the trenches with you.
Right. They get to debate the value of specific KPIs in real time. They see their feedback immediately reflected in the draft. And because they were part of the architectural process, they become deeply invested in the outcome.
It becomes their dashboard.
Exactly. They inherently trust the final product because they help draw the blueprint.
Think about your last major data project for a second. How much time did you spend arguing over calculations or dealing with, passive-aggressive emails about moving a chart to a different page well after the dashboard was supposedly finished?
Oh, I'm sure people are cringing just thinking about it.
Right. How much frustration could have been avoided if everyone had just looked at a zero-code mock-up first and agreed on the vision before the coding began?
It is a painful memory for a lot of analysts and data engineers, but the source material makes it incredibly clear that it does not have to be that way. Early planning, using the right tools to provide a visual anchor, and securing robust stakeholder involvement are the absolute keys to long-term success.
It's a total shift in mindset.
It is. You move your entire data culture from a reactive cycle of frustration to a proactive cycle of collaboration.
So what does this all mean? If we distill everything we have unpacked today, the ultimate takeaway is quite simple. Skipping the alignment phase to use a quick template is a false shortcut.
It really is.
It might feel fast on day one when you download the file, but it will inevitably cost you weeks of agonizing rework on day 30. True speed and actual efficiency comes from a planning-first approach. You have to use interactive wireframes to gather that critical early feedback and lock in your requirements.
Because your ultimate goal isn't just to build a dashboard. I mean, anyone can slap some charts together with a pre-built template.
Right.
Your goal is to build an analytical tool that your teams implicitly trust, that they intuitively understand, and that they actually use to make informed strategic decisions.
Absolutely.
We challenge you to try this approach. The next time a data request comes across your desk, before you write a single line of SQL code, before you touch a single row of raw data, sit down and wireframe it first.
Sketch it out. Get the alignment, secure the sign-off, and just watch how much smoother the actual heavy lifting goes when everyone is finally working from the same blueprint. It is a total paradigm shift for how businesses handle their intelligence.
And this raises an important question for you to think about. If human beings are deeply visual thinkers who only know it when they see it, How many bad business decisions are we making simply because our critical data was trapped in a rigid, confusing template that no one fully understood? Wow. That is definitely a thought to chew on for the rest of the day. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into data designed with mockup. We hope this arms you with the knowledge to stop fighting with static templates and start building better data experiences through wider framing.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Until next time, keep questioning the layout, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.